All right, welcome to the latest episode of the Colman Power Organic Fitness Podcast. I have my latest guest here in front of me, gut health expert. We have Anne Darcy from Tipperary. How are you, Anne?
I'm good. How are you today? On this freezing cold morning.
As the two of us are huddling a warm cup of some sort of beverage. You're on the coffee, I'm on the green tea.
I'm on the coffee. Organic coffee.
Organic green tea. Cheers to that.
Very important.
Yeah, too right. Well, I brought you on, Anne, to talk about a little bit more about the likes of gut health, how important it is, and maybe even more specifically infertility, both male and females. So even before we go into that, I just wanted you to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and where you're based and that.
So I'm a naturopath trained in Australia. I did a degree in health science and naturopathy back in the 90s, late 90s. Started life as a nurse and then moved into homeopathy, and from there moved into naturopathy. So restoring health naturally is really my thing. Trying to bring people back into a healthy state in the most natural way, whether it's digestion, whether it's your nutrition, it's what you're eating. What you're eating is just so important. But restoring health naturally is really my thing. Because if we're not right, we're wrong. It's the something. If the symptom's going on, it's telling you something. It's a bit like the oil light on the dash, isn't it? And so if you're complaining of anything, or you're sensing that something is not right with yourself, there's a reason for it. So then you go digging to see what's the reason, and then you go correcting the reason. It's no different than you're out with your soil and you're growing, and you're going to produce, right? You're not going to plant one seed and get a different outcome, and you're not going to plant it in bad soil and get a different outcome, and you're not going to. So you're aware with your soil, and it's the same thing. We're the soil, right? So what do we put in and what do we get out? So if you're going on as you're going now, where are you going to get to? If you're just as you are now and you keep going healthy, are you going to end up healthy? Do you know, that's where I come from.
Yeah, well, that's great. I want to even just go on to that point. What's the first signs, I suppose, of an unhealthy gut, and that you would see with clients or people that you come into contact with on a regular basis?
So how many times do you hear people say you're bloated, or, so you eat the food, you digest the food. And then once that food has gone down, it is going to break down properly or not properly. If it's not digesting, it's fermenting. And if it's fermenting, you're going to produce wind. You're your own brewery. So if you're fermenting it, you're rising bubbles, you're burping. Little small, it doesn't have to be the big, huge, noisy burp. It can just be the little tiny burp. So if you're burping it, that's wind coming up. You're fermenting it. You're the brewery. That food is creating that wind. You're full. You can only eat certain things. You're craving the carbohydrates then because you're fermenting them, right? Your stomach isn't right. You're not digesting the proteins. You need to eat the meat to build the muscle, but you're not actually handling the proteins. You're eating a sausage or a nugget because you can't handle the good proteins because your stomach's not right. Once that food leaves the stomach, it's going into the gut. Now, it should have been broken down. Now it's not broken down. Now it's creating some kind of an allergy reaction or a food intolerant reaction. So those proteins that should have gone down well digested are gone down poorly digested. What are they triggering? They're triggering the allergy reaction. You're scratching your skin because you're creating histamine. You're here rubbing your nose with histamine, with itch, because you're creating histamine. So your food that didn't digest is triggering that reaction. Hey, then it's meeting the mucus lining, so it's triggering the mucus. Now all of a sudden you've got this mucus production. What have you got? You've got the runny nose, the sinuses, the glue ear, the chesty thing. So if you haven't digested the food, now it's going down. And it's triggering the allergy reaction, it's triggering the mucus reaction. You're going around cough and phlegm. That's signs of a gut. Then what does the gut do? It makes all the B vitamins for energy. So you're here personal training, right? And you're saying, hey, turn up for a session. Oh, do I have to go? I have no energy to go. So number one, you need the digestion to get your muscles built, right? You need energy to get you out of bed, to get you moving, to get you doing the stuff. But the B vitamins are produced. We eat them, but they're inactive. They have to be activated. How do we activate them? We activate them with the gut bacteria. The gut bacteria does the job. So now we don't have enough of the B vitamins. We're trying to extract the minerals. The gut bacteria is involved in that. We're trying to make the brain chemicals, the serotonin, the get up and go. Get up and go, get out of the bed, get up and go, get the motivation, dopamine. 50% of dopamine made by the gut bacteria, the get up and go, get me out of bed. Serotonin, I feel like going. Oh, I don't know if I feel like going. The glass half full, the glass half empty. Serotonin, right? GABA, calm head, all produced by the gut bacteria. So you say, hey, I ask that question again. How do you know you have a bad gut? you're moody, you're not relaxed, you have no get up and go, you've got no energy.
And
You know,
I'm just going to say, this is great. This is great. I've talked loads about the gut health before, but right now, I don't know, maybe it's in the frame of mind that I'm in. It's so visual. If you have irritation, if you have a runny nose, if you have mucus, if you have bloating, all these things are quite visual for people to see. And and it's kind of like, oh, those are the signs, those are the symptoms. And so right now we've touched on issues of the likes of irritable gut. How do we aid in digestion?
So you want to be eating food that suits you anyway. Now, can I go back to your organics and talking about organics? When they're not organic, they have been sprayed, and they're sprayed with something that is patented as an antibiotic. So I can turn around and say I didn't have an antibiotic since 1981, which I didn't. An antibiotic in my last antibiotic. But if I'm eating feed through the animals that they've been fed with sprayed food, or if I'm eating sprayed food, I'm taking antibiotics all the time. Or if I eat chicken that's been fed with antibiotics to keep them, you know, alive long enough to get to market, then I'm still getting antibiotics. So it's very hard in this day and age to totally avoid the antibiotics that are damaging your gut bacteria. But just realize your gut bacteria has been damaged all the time. So then you have to look at it and say, okay, if my gut bacteria has been damaged, I need to eat for health. I can take enzymes, I can take probiotics, I can try and put back in the good bacteria. I want loads of good fiber because I want to feed that bacteria. So number one, you want to digest it. If you're not digesting it, you probably need some enzymes. If you're having a poor digestion, let me run back to the fermented food. If you're fermenting it, you're growing candida, you're creating that yeast overgrowth. If you look at your tongue and it's coated, you know, it's often a sign of a yeast overgrowth. If you're getting any kind of thrush, any kind of skin, fungally rashes, you know, athlete's foot, what they'll call jock itch, you know, any of those rashy kind of fungally rashes, they're coming on the back of you not digesting and you fermenting and you being the brewery. Therefore, if you have a candida overgrowth, what do you crave? Sugars. You're fermenting your carbs, you're fermenting your starches, you're fermenting your fruit. Remember, they make cider here. Bulmer's cider is made on apples. So if you're eating an apple and you're fermenting it, you're creating cider. If you're eating a grain and you're fermenting it, you're making a beer. So your own belly becomes your fermentation brewery, and you're going to be craving more of those carbs because they're using up your carbohydrate. And we now know the carbs are linked back into that fat belly. Do you know, where do you put all that spare sugar? You pump out the insulin, you get all this extra craving for sugar, you're eating more sugar, you're raising your insulin levels, and then you're parking all that sugar, you're turning it into fat and you're storing it in making the fatty liver, or you're making the fatty belly. So I would say take a digestive enzyme because you want to digest the food, because you don't want to be fermenting that food. And then when you're looking at your gut, you're really thinking, what am I going to put into this gut? You want the good fibers to feed it, good healthy, vegetable fibers and that. And you want to maybe take some probiotics. Maybe we need to be killing off some overgrowth of bacteria. You know, that's a new term, isn't it? SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So we've got this bacterial overgrowth, we can have fungal overgrowth, we can have parasite overgrowth. We've all this stuff going on. So when the gut's not right, there's something wrong. And then it's identify which one, everyone has a different pattern, don't they? We're so individual. So which one do you try and fix? Do you go enzymes? Do you go probiotic? Do you need to kill off a fungus? Do you know, is there an overgrowth of bacteria? So if you've got bloating, burping, wind, you've got a pain in your belly, you've got a colic, you've got maybe constipation, diarrhea, something, you know, like people know themselves and they say, oh yeah, my stomach's not right today. Or, oh, I can't stomach that food. I can't stomach it.
And then you were mentioning the likes of probiotics there. So are you recommending more so a particular type of supplement, or are you recommending a whole food? Is this probiotics? Just so people know what a probiotic is, explain that as well for me.
Yeah, you've got prebiotics that feed the good bacteria, and you've probiotics that are the good bacteria. And if we have a really healthy, good, healthy gut, we've loads of that acidophilus, lactobacillus, lactobacillus, you know, that's often in the milk and in the yogurts, the acidophilus, and there's lots of other bifidobacterias, and you've got all these other ones that should be alive in the gut, and we kill them. So sometimes you'll take a supplement of a probiotic. There's different ones. If you're one of those high allergy people, like the sniffly nose, maybe lactobacillus plantarum, maybe rhamnosus, there's different types of bacteria. And then you're looking to see, well, what are you targeting here? What do you have? you know, if you're the allergy person, you might need the rhamnosus one. And if you're, you know, like an irritable gut, there's another one. And if you've got inflammatory gut, there's another one. So, but again, whole foods, if you're eating yogurt, a lot of people are having kefir. They're having milk kefir, or they're making water kefir, and they're making their own sauerkraut, and they're making fermented vegetables. And these were things that were always there. And, you know, we're kind of getting back into, hey, if we're going back into the old-fashioned way of eating, really, if you can eat as simply as you can and have some old fermented foods going in, you will help you to recover your own gut, you know. Yeah.
And I suppose that's great. I'd be a firm believer in either making your own sauerkraut, which is very easy. It's literally just salt and cabbage kneaded together and steeped in a bowl, and make sure it's submerged. And other probiotics that I had on a previous show was the likes of Kerry Kefir. I don't know if you come across
it. It's a fantastic product, because I do know it, and you know, I know, it's fantastic.
It certainly is, and trying to get more people. But you mentioned on the likes of maybe someone who is suffering, because a lot of people do suffer with sinus and issues with that particular irritability. What specific maybe probiotic or even prebiotics would you recommend to those individuals?
So if you have sinus, number one, you have to be on digestive enzymes, or taking, like, just remember that pineapple and kiwi fruit and papaya have natural digestive enzymes in there. So you want to start reducing that digestive upset by making sure you're digesting the food, right? So you're either going to take something that's an enzyme in food, or you're going to take a supplement of a digestive enzyme. The kefirs are fantastic, and the fermented food, because they are recolonizing your gut with the bacteria that we need. That old, you know, you're going to just get so many more colonies of bacteria, I suppose. If you have that allergy tendency, that hay fever, that high histamine, then the probiotic you're looking for is like a Lactobacillus rhamnosus. So that's where you're really going into having some supplements. But the fermented foods, it's a combination, isn't it? It's like, what are you treating? What are you treating? How bad is it? So if you have the mucus, that whole sinusy head you want to drain. And can I say, if you have sinus, horseradish is fantastic. That if you have a blocked nose and you just can hardly breathe with it, and you just take horseradish, even horseradish sauce. But my favorite then is the wasabi, Japanese green wasabi mustard, because that is made from horseradish. You just put that on a piece of ham or something that you can chew, or anything you can chew, and you just keep it in your mouth and you chew, and your nose will run. Horseradish. So there's a whole load of natural cures as well, isn't there, that work really well. So
spices that I would spices as well. Adding in the cayenne pepper is one of the things that I would add in if I ever have a stuffed up, I suppose, nose.
It'll make your nose run.
Yes, it's opening up the airways and opening up the flow.
Yeah, and turmeric. I mean, I took a soup out of the freezer last night. And I didn't know what was going to be in it until I opened it, and it was full of turmeric, because when I made it, I had loads of turmeric in it. And turmeric is great as an anti-inflammatory, and turmeric with some oil and with pepper. So I'll often make just like a cup of soup. I grew up with my mother having hot cup, but now my hot cup, I don't do hot cups, but my, you know, but I will just take out some bouillon, and I'll take a teaspoon of turmeric, some black pepper, Himalayan rock salt for the minerals, or sea salt, right?
Yeah.
And then you can put your cayenne pepper in there, and you know, I'll sometimes, you know, I'll put garlic in there. I can put some ginger. I'm doing a different, you know, I put chili, whatever, you know, and I just make a hot cup of soup, and I know that I'm getting a teaspoon of turmeric with the black pepper and the oil. I'll put coconut oil in. So if you put a teaspoon of coconut oil, it's actually going to give you the heat. It's going to give you energy, like it's a medium chain triglyceride. Those medium chain triglycerides, you think you're having fat, but you're just going to burn that fat off. It's not going to ever store anywhere as extra fat. So you get away with having that medium chain triglyceride that's really good for brain energy. So if you're on the run and you just want to have something, rather than have a tea or a coffee, just make up that turmeric soup with your teaspoon of coconut oil. And that teaspoon is enough, even a tablespoon. Depends how active you want to be. You go off in your training or whatever, and you've got the anti-inflammatory effect of the turmeric. You've got the extra energy of the medium chain triglyceride in the coconut oil. You know, fantastic. Yeah, so spice is fantastic. And turmeric is great as an anti-inflammatory. So if you've got that clogged head and that real sinus inflammation, the cayenne pepper, as you say, horseradish, put some wasabi into that. Oh, I actually must think about it. I don't get blocked sinuses, so I don't have to treat it in myself. But I can now, as I'm thinking about it, if I made that turmeric soup and I give a little squirt of wasabi, mustard into it, that would be fantastic for draining that nose. Carry a tissue. It's going to pour. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I suppose we're at that time of year where a lot of people would maybe suffering from the likes of sinuses, and that's why I kind of brought that up. So next thing we've mentioned the likes of carbohydrates, and maybe I want to maybe touch on the likes of carbohydrates and insulin resistance, and that'll lead us on to the likes of where I want to go with this kind of podcast.
Yeah. So insulin resistance. So when you eat a high carbohydrate diet, now, if you have a bad gut with a lot of fungus, you are craving more carbohydrate. If you're eating more carbohydrate, the natural response is that your insulin level goes up. The more your insulin level goes up, the more the body rejects that, and it says, I have to close off these insulin receptors. So it becomes more insulin resistant. But it's two sides of a coin. You cannot have insulin resistance without then having high insulin in your blood. So if we started calling it hyperinsulinemia, which is high blood insulin, then you see an awful lot of the side effects are from this high blood insulin. Now, when I was living in Australia, you could get an insulin level tested with your regular bloods. And I got them tested. Mine were okay. But here, you can't unless you're going to a specialist endocrinologist. You can't just go in and say to the doctor, can you check my insulin levels? I think they'll be doing it eventually, but in Australia, it was just common practice. If you wanted an insulin level done, they're able to check it for you. But if your insulin levels are up, then that it can often trigger high blood pressure. So the first signs of insulin resistance is that your blood pressure goes up. But your high insulin is also linked to, say, in men, we're going to have a little bit of a chat about fertility. You have to have performance. You have to have male performance. Where
are you going with this, Anne?
You got to be able to do it. You got to be able to. You got to be able to get it there, right? But one of the signs of insulin resistance is erectile dysfunction, because you need blood supply to get in there to actually get that performance to actually get somebody pregnant, right? So that's one side of insulin resistance, and that's a big side. And a really important side. And then on the other side, we have the girls. 25% of infertility, 25% of women in America, and we're following close behind with infertility. And we're looking at polycystic ovaries. And for you, one of the signs of insulin resistance is polycystic ovaries. For you to release that egg, to get it fertilized. See, there's two sides, right? You got to release the egg and you got to get the sperm to meet it, right? So you need both parties coming to the table. You got to release that egg and you've got to get a sperm to meet it. And the releasing of an egg is triggered. You need to have insulin to do that job. And when you don't have it, when you've become more insulin resistant, it's just not happening for you. You're not releasing the egg. And these eggs then these eggs are coming to the surface, but they're not actually getting released. They can't be fertilized. So when you help somebody to reduce that insulin resistance, then these eggs can get released. And here's one of the things that is probably not known as much. It's not. Can you imagine cracking your whole dozen eggs this morning just to eat 2 eggs? Just say you wanted to eat 2 eggs this morning and you go out and you crack the whole dozen. You are bringing up about a dozen eggs maybe at a time, and one releases and the rest of them go back down. In this insulin resistance situation, they're not going back down. They're coming up and they're staying up. So you're kind of cracking your eggs early in life if you don't address this insulin resistance early enough. And I know that people are going and getting a diagnosis and being told, but we'll deal with your getting pregnant down the line. Why would you wait cracking a dozen eggs every month? Why not conserve your eggs? Because, we do a blood test then, the anti-Müllerian hormone, to see what's your egg reserve. And we discover that these people don't have a high egg reserve because they've been cracking eggs for years. Too many eggs have come to the surface and not gone back down. So you're actually wanting to save those eggs. It's a really important factor here, because I do know that people are being told, when you're wanting to get pregnant, we'll deal with it then. But the high insulin, the high carbohydrate diet. So if you have, let me go chain reaction for you here. So if you have that digestive upset, and then with that, you have this high fungal overgrowth that's giving you the craving for sugars, that is in turn giving you the high insulin, that is creating the insulin resistance, that is interfering with the way your ovary is releasing your eggs and giving you these polycystic ovaries. Now, all estrogen is made out of testosterone. It was first progesterone. It was first cholesterol. So cholesterol turns into progesterone, turns into testosterone, turns into estrogen. So if you don't make the enzyme and you're blocking this enzyme that converts your testosterone to estrogen, you're not getting the spike of estrogen to release the egg, but you're stuck with testosterone that you don't want in a female that's giving you some facial hair growth. And you don't want that because you yourself, you want your testosterone. I want a small bit. You want plenty. I want more estrogen. You don't want a lot of estrogen. So we're seeing men with more estrogen, women with more testosterone. We're seeing all these imbalances. And if they were coming from you eating a high carbohydrate diet, that goes back to you having maybe fungal overgrowth and you're not digesting well, so you're craving the carbs. Your stomach and the protein digestion is poor. You know, you're trying to make muscle with the proteins, but you're not able to digest them well. You're eating too much carbohydrate. The high insulin is saying park all that sugar that you're eating, we'll turn it into fat and we'll give you the fatty liver, or we'll put the fat in the belly. So you're dealing, your personal training people who are, you know, I'll say busting a gut to try and lose the belly fat, and they're finding it harder. You see exactly who I've explained. You're seeing it all the time, I'd say, right?
Yeah, no, you're on the same page.
So again, it's back to fix the gut, get the body digesting the food properly, control the carbohydrates that you're eating, control the amount of carbohydrates, eat plenty of protein. You know, fat gives you no insulin rise at all. So you can get away with eating good, healthy fats.
Yeah.
Coconut oil, medium chain triglyceride is good, healthy fat. Take your 2 eggs in the morning, scramble them with some coconut oil, have some avocado. And then with mine, I would have spinach and maybe mushrooms and onions. And, you know, I'll make a good breakfast that is a vegetable and egg type of breakfast. Then there's no insulin spike from that. So you're not having a high insulin and a sugar drop. Like people are going out having a dessert for breakfast, you know, a bowl of cereal, lovely and sweet, by the way, and, you know, granola with fruit yogurt and loads of sugar in it. And, you know, 2 hours later, they're starving. Their sugar has dropped already. And they're back craving the scone, another bit of carbohydrate. And then they have their cheese sandwich. And then they get sugars are going up and down all day long. And their mood and their energy, and it's a yo-yo. It's a yo-yo because you're going to crave the sugars because the brain is always saying, "Fuel me up, fuel me. I'm low." Do you know? So, and what's the quickest thing you'll go for is that sugary, carbohydrate-y, something sweet that's going to bring you back up as quick as you can, because the brain is driving it, isn't it? It's saying, "Feed me quick. I'm in a starvation mode." However, if your brain is needing it, and we have sugar, glycogen stored in our liver and in our muscles, you know, we are trying to release that. So if we go very low blood sugar, we will get that adrenaline spike that will release glycogen because the sugar went so low. And if you get that adrenaline spike, your heart is racing, and now you think you've had a panic attack, but it's actually often from a low blood sugar. Or you wake up at night sweating with your heart racing, and you're thinking, oh, it's like you had a bad dream or you had a panic attack. But if you've had a low blood sugar in the middle of the night, it will wake you out of your sleep as if you've just had a frightful, you know, really frightening experience. So again, it's like panic attacks and waking up startled, but low blood sugars. Remember, they continue through the night. If you're topping up all day with sugars, don't think you're going to get a straight 8 hours sleep without the sugar dropping. They say you need as much energy to climb a mountain as what you need for the job that's done while you're sleeping. And remember, sleep, you know, you are replenishing everything for tomorrow. You're getting your hormones ready. You're like the person restocking the shelves in the supermarket. That's what's happening at night. You're getting ready for tomorrow. So there's a lot of work gets done at night while you're asleep. And if you keep waking up, very fast waking up with your heart racing, just consider that could be a low blood sugar that's happening during the night. So sleep disturbance. There's so many parts to it, isn't there?
It's huge, and like, sure, we can even go and maybe want to talk about a little bit about the likes of there's two different types of carbohydrate that people may get confused about and say, God, okay, no carbohydrates, and
Yeah.
then completely restrict all type of carbohydrates. So there are two main type of carbohydrates: the simple and the complex. I suppose maybe if you expand on that, because people say, God, we're after listening to this podcast with Colman and Anne, they said carbohydrates are gone, right? So I'm out. Am I really on a keto? Is that what I'm talking about? Because the body is craving that, as we were touching on, and it wants sugars. Yeah, because the brain and most certainly the muscles are run off preferably carbohydrates, unless you're running off ketones, which the majority of people aren't in. So we can touch on simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates just for the viewers and the listeners.
Yeah, and the brain uses ketones really well. So for the people who do go into ketosis, then their brain is getting great energy from ketones. But most people are just looking at controlling their carbs. And there's simple carbs is your teaspoon of sugar. But your white bread that has been stripped of all its complex outer coating is also a simple carbohydrate. It'll convert really quickly into sugar. And your white pasta. So when you're getting a whole grain, you're still okay with eating grains, but if you have a whole grain, or if you're having your porridge, porridge oats, I have pressure cooked oats like you'd feed the horses. They're beautiful, but they still take about an hour to cook in a pressure cooker. So most people are not doing whole oats. You're usually buying a flake of oats, but you can still buy a heavier flake of oats. That is more of a complex carbohydrate. But if you're nearly melted your porridge down, it's almost like a quick carbohydrate, a quick release. I tend to recommend people put nuts and seeds with their grains, because then you're putting in the protein and the fat with the grain. And what you're trying to do is get this slow release of sugar. You want this kind of a curve of blood sugar balance, not this, this highs and lows. Because if you just have a bowl of porridge with a tablespoon of honey or even a teaspoon of honey, you've taken sugar and sugar. If you have it with juice, you've had sugar, sugar, and sugar.
Yeah.
And that's a very fast carbohydrate. But if you balance it out, so if you are going to have the cereal, then make sure you're putting protein and fat with it. Either you can be putting a tablespoon of peanut butter in, but remember, even the nuts and seeds also have carbohydrate, but they are more complex. And the more solid they are, that they haven't been processed, the better it is,
Yeah, and that's trying to get more people to have and not be afraid of the likes of, firstly, protein that is beneficial for repairing the likes of your skin and maintaining muscle, keeping your foot up for longer. But fats curb cravings as well. There's a huge myth that was put out there for a long time. There was fats make you fat. They do have higher calories, but don't ever be worried about fats from the likes of egg yolks in particular, or from either cooking oil. And I wouldn't actually be a major fan of the 0-calorie sprays. It's more so
not at all.
Yeah.
No, not at all. You want to have good fats. And years ago, like, you look at old photographs. Do you see a fat person? No. And do we see the big heavy belly? Not really. That's a carbohydrate. And, it really was the American government, and it really was the let's demonize the fats, and it was the sugar industry that won out. And we got low-fat yogurt. You look at your small little tub of low-fat yogurt, you read the back of it, and you see 18 grams of carbs. And every 5 grams is a teaspoon of sugar. So if you see 15, there's 3 teaspoons. If you see 20 grams of sugar in that small little tub of yogurt, that's 4 teaspoons of sugar. Now, if I said to you, take your plain yogurt and you were going to put in 4 spoons of sugar before you eat it, you would sensibly say that cannot be right. Yeah. But they're all hidden in there, and it's only when you start reading the back of it. But people have become obsessed with the low-fat diet, and the low-fat diet doesn't help anybody. And what do we have? We've got a nation of, a world of increased dementia. We need good fats for the brain. And in dementia, for example, one of the biggest reasons is the insulin resistance to the brain. So all this, we've reduced our fats, good fats to the brain. We've raised our sugar. We've become more insulin resistant, where our brain cells that should be getting energy are not getting energy, and they're just decreasing. And you know what? I bet you're like me. You value your brain more than anything. I love my brain. I wouldn't risk my brain. I really, of all things, my brain is my prize, So would I say the same for you? You love your brain.
Yeah, without it, I'd just be a shell of a man.
Yes. So, so to me, everything we should be doing is very much focused on keeping ourselves healthy, and energy is great. Because I'll often ask people, how do you feel? And out of 10, how do you rate your digestion? How do you rate your immunity out of 10? 10 should be the best. How do you rate your energy out of 10? How do you rate pain and inflammation? And how do you rate your mood? Well, pain and inflammation should be 0, because you're getting people who don't turn up for a session because they're in such pain and inflammation. So you want to make sure they don't have pain and inflammation. But if you eat right, if your immunity is good, your energy is good, your mood is good, like that's life to me. You know, outside of that, the hormonal control, you know, because you want your thyroid working, you know, you want your insulin, that's a hormone. So, you know, if I want to turn power off here this minute, I trip the switch, and all power to every plug, and the television isn't broken, but the power is gone. Those hormones are creating the power. They're sending the messages to run everything else. So your thyroid is your metabolism. If it's working well, you've got high metabolism. Your insulin, you know, not only does the insulin tell the sugar to get into that cell and burn off, but it tells the muscle cell to build muscle. An insulin resistant person is missing the signal, like the light switch on the wall that will turn on the bulb. It's missing the signal that says build muscle. An insulin resistant person is missing the signal in a muscle cell to build muscle. Isn't that interesting?
And it all comes down to food, and that is food most certainly can change your life. And the foods you eat have a massive effect on the way you look, you feel, and how much energy levels you have. Whether it's a problem with insulin resistance, whether it's a problem with you infertility, your skin, your, I suppose, whole health system, whether it's sinus issues or bloating,
all of that,
and everything else.
And all of that. But like, I got into my car this morning, it wouldn't start. So I had to get my brother to jumpstart. So that was the battery and the electricity, right? So it couldn't actually start the car. So I got a jumpstart. The car is fine now. It was -3. And I probably left the back door open last night. And anyway, the car was flat. But if I had no fuel in that car, then that car was not going to run either. But if I had put petrol instead of diesel in that car was not going to run either. So do you know what I'm saying? So all of these things that we are dealing with, all of these things, what we put in is what we become. And if we control what we put in, we can control the output. And if we're not right now, you know, like when I started college in Australia, and it was in 1996, my first lecturer said, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. So I'll tell you, I can tell that you bounced out of bed this morning and got whatever jobs, you were out in the woods already. You know what I'm saying? You didn't look around and say -3, I'm not going. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I was out and ready to go for a walk at 7:30. We're going to do it now. We were going to do it at 7:30, you know, but we'll do our walk. But you bounced out. You were not in a, we see the world.
Yeah, and that's down to the production of serotonin and dopamine in my gut. And you mentioned that here in that podcast. And it's great for listeners to hear from somebody else and go, Jesus Christ, Colman, how is he have so much energy? And what the hell is he eating? It's the foods that we are consuming, and myself and yourself and anyone else who has their gut on point, literally have more energy, and are kind of like, Jesus, it must be something that they're drinking, like, well, green tea and organic coffee or everything else in between. It's the things that you put in, and I've written that down. What you put in is what we become.
Yes, and if you're looking towards your future and you're saying, what am I right now? Where am I at? And that's what you're looking towards your future at, and how far out is your lifespan? Here's another one. What's your health span? Like the lifespan, you know, I don't want to be 90 or 100 and spending my last 20 years somebody pushing me around and feeding me off a spoon. I actually want my health span to be, I'm 90 or 100 years of age and I'm feeding somebody else if it has to be off a spoon. Well, no, I'd prefer everybody to not be fed, you know, off a spoon. I'd prefer everybody to be happy, healthy, upright, and living. You go over to Japan and you see the 110-year-olds that are out tilling the fields. They just expect the good health span because that's the way they are. They do it right. You know, when we look at the Okinawans and you know, so many of them over the 100, but healthy 100s. You know, they're talking about their great grandkids that they're minding. And we've just kind of started to accept that, well, the lifespan is one thing, but health span, you think you will be healthy going forward because you at this age have already decided that's your future. And you have educated yourself to know that that's so important. You know, you're not rolling a dice when you get up in the morning and you're going to say, hey, I'm going to eat this crap and expect a different outcome, right? You're conscious of what goes into your system. because you know that your outcome. So if you were looking at where am I now and what's my future, if you're perfectly great, I would continue what I'm doing right now, and you'll continue what you're doing right now, because you know that that's helping you to have great energy, good immunity, that your mood is good. You know what I'm saying? And that you're not suffering with pain. You didn't crawl out of bed on your hands and knees because you were so stiff and sore this morning. Whereas there are people I know who are crawling out and can't put their 2 feet fully on the ground, and they're hopping on their toes to the toilet because their calf muscles are so tight that they can't even get the heels on the ground, and their aches and pains are so bad they can't sleep. I see plenty of it, do you know?
And I suppose that's what I want people to do, to reach out to people such as yourself, Anne, and just be conscious of your time and getting out in that morning sunlight, which is actually beneficial as well to you. So right, if I want you to tell the listeners where's the best place for them to connect with you, I know you also have a gut course that I want you to most certainly tell people where they can get and go to sign up for that, Anne.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. It's Anne Darcy ND, and you can send messages in there. The course is Healthy Gut, Happy Brain. Now I'm doing 5 actually, but the first one is Healthy Gut, Happy Brain, and all of them will be starting with learning the gut. But it's the other ones are immunity, energy, hormonal control, thyroid, insulin resistance, and that, right? Thyroid, male and female hormones as well. And then the other one is pain and inflammation, because I reckon if you get those 5 core things right, digestion, immunity, energy, the mood and the brain stuff, as well as the pain and inflammation, if you control those, you're back in health.
Yeah, brilliant.
And when I mean health, I mean good health. I mean really good, strong health. So anyway, there is a workshop coming up. It's next Tuesday, the 13th of December is the first one. And then every second week in January, I will be doing the energy, immunity, pain and inflammation, and the hormonal control. They will be recorded, so if you miss out on them, they will be available. But it's on Anne Darcy ND on Instagram is the link for there. So I think that's the easiest way for most people to contact.
And what I'll do is I'll put all those in the show notes, and most certainly people will connect with you from that point. And I always end these podcasts by saying, stay tuned, stay classy, and keep it organic.